Imagine waking up in the dead of night, wrapped in absolute, suffocating darkness, thousands of years before the first clock was ever forged. Today, when sleep eludes us, we reach for the glowing screen of a smartphone, checking the time, counting the hours left until sunrise, and feeling a creeping sense of isolation and anxiety. But for our distant ancestors, a sleepless night was not an isolated medical malfunction. It was a deeply profound, sometimes terrifying, and entirely different human experience. What filled the silence when there were no books to read, no electricity to banish the shadows, and no concept of an 8-hour workday waiting tomorrow? The answer reveals that our modern battle with insomnia might actually be a misunderstood relic of ancient survival. To understand what an ancient human did when they could not sleep, we must first dismantle everything we think we know about a normal night's rest. In the modern world, we treat sleep as a single, monolithic 8-hour block, and if we wake up in the middle of it, we assume something is wrong with us. Yet, historical and anthropological evidence suggests that for the vast majority of human history, sleep was never continuous. It was segmented. Our ancestors lived by a rhythm that scientists call biphasic sleep, falling into a first sleep shortly after dusk, waking up for an hour or two in the dead of night, and then returning to a second sleep until dawn. When an ancient human woke up at 2 in the morning, they did not lie there, tossing and turning in frustration. They simply accepted it as the natural transition into a unique, liminal space. But if waking up in the middle of the night was entirely normal, what did they actually do during those quiet, dark hours? The answer depends heavily on the environment, but it almost always began with the single most important invention in human history: fire. When the first sleep broke, an individual would quietly rise from their bed of leaves or animal skins and step toward the dying embers of the communal hearth. In the pitch black of a prehistoric landscape, the fire was the only boundary between life and death. A sleepless person would gently stoke the coals, adding fresh wood to keep the predators at bay. In doing so, they inadvertently stepped into a vital evolutionary role, becoming the silent guardian of the tribe, while the others drifted through the subconscious. This realization introduces a fascinating evolutionary theory known as the sentinel hypothesis. When modern researchers studied the Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer societies on Earth, they tracked the sleep patterns of the tribe over several weeks. What they discovered was shocking. Out of more than 200 hours of collective sleep, there were only a total of 18 minutes where every single adult was asleep at the same time. On average, at least 8 adults were awake at any given moment throughout the night. This means that what we call insomnia today might not be a modern disease at all, but rather an ancient genetic survival trait. Your ancestral night owls were the reason the tribe survived the night, their natural wakefulness acting as a living, breathing security system. Yet, sitting by a fire for hours can be deeply lonely, raising the question of how these ancient night watchmen occupied their minds. Without digital distractions, the human brain under the cover of darkness becomes hyper-aware, its senses sharpened by the evolutionary necessity to detect danger. To pass the time and calm their heightened senses, ancient humans turned to craftsmanship. In the dim, flickering amber light of the hearth, a sleepless individual would often pick up a piece of flint, a length of wood, or an animal bone. They would sit for hours, quietly scraping, chipping, and shaping tools or weapons. The repetitive rhythmic sound of stone striking stone or wood being carved served as a form of ancient meditation, occupying the hands while allowing the restless mind to slowly unwind. But what happened when the night was too dark, or the weather too fierce to sit outside by the fire? When trapped inside a cave or a primitive shelter, a sleepless human had to find ways to navigate the interior landscape of their own mind. In the absolute quiet, away from the daily struggle for caloric survival, the brain finally had the space to process trauma, plan for the future, and contemplate the mysterious nature of existence. It is highly likely that the very birth of human spirituality, philosophy, and art occurred during these midnight hours of wakefulness. By the light of a tiny fat-burning lamp, a restless hunter or gatherer might reach out and paint the silhouette of a bison on a cavern wall, turning their insomnia into a canvas for the human soul. This quiet reflection, however, was not always a solitary endeavor. Because segmented sleep was common to the entire group, a sleepless person was rarely entirely alone. As one person sat by the fire, another would inevitably wake from their first sleep and join them. In these midnight intervals, away from the hierarchies and tasks of the daytime, a different kind of social bonding occurred. People spoke in hushed tones so as to not wake the children, sharing stories, interpreting the vivid dreams they had just emerged from, and passing down oral histories. The night became a space for deep intimacy, a time when secrets were traded and relationships were solidified under the canopy of the stars. This brings us to one of the most mysterious aspects of the ancient night, the sky itself. Today, light pollution has erased the cosmos from our daily lives, but to an ancient human, the night sky was a brilliant, swirling tapestry of infinite depth. When sleep would not come, our ancestors would lie on their backs and gaze upward, reading the movement of the stars like a massive, celestial clock. They noticed the shifting positions of constellations, mapping the seasons and predicting the migration patterns of the animals they hunted. A sleepless night was an opportunity to study the universe, turning a moment of physical restlessness into a profound connection with the cosmos. However, the ancient night was not always a peaceful sanctuary of stars and storytelling. It could also be a theater of absolute terror. When the wind howled through the trees and the fire struggled to stay lit, a sleepless human was left entirely vulnerable to the sounds of the dark. The snap of a twig, the distant roar of a cave lion, or the low growl of a predator lurking just beyond the light could send the nervous system into a state of high alert. When ancient humans could not sleep because of fear, their bodies flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, keeping them suspended in a state of hypervigilance. They would sit motionless, gripping their weapons, straining their ears to decipher the geography of the sounds around them, knowing that a single mistake could mean the end of their lineage. This constant threat of nocturnal danger meant that our ancestors eventually had to develop ways to actively induce sleep when their bodies refused to rest. Long before the invention of synthetic sleeping pills, ancient humans turned to the pharmacy of the natural world. Through thousands of years of trial and error, they discovered that certain plants possessed the power to quiet the racing mind and soothe the aching body. They harvested wild lettuce, chamomile, willow bark, and in some regions, the potent sap of the opium poppy. These botanicals were brewed into bitter teas or chewed raw before bed. If an ancient human found themselves chronically unable to sleep, they relied on the deep ethnobotanical knowledge of their tribe's healer to guide them back into the shadows of slumber. Beyond physical remedies, ancient societies also developed complex rituals and charms designed to ward off the invisible forces they believed caused sleeplessness. To the prehistoric mind, chronic insomnia was not viewed as a physical ailment, but as a spiritual disturbance, the work of malevolent spirits, angry ancestors, or wandering demons who stole a person's rest. To combat these unseen entities, sleepless individuals would burn specific aromatic resins, like frankincense or sage, filling the sleeping quarters with dense, purifying smoke. They wore amulets carved from protective stones or animal teeth, and repeated sacred chants meant to shield their consciousness as they transitioned from the waking world to the realm of dreams. As human civilization advanced and agriculture began to replace the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, the way we handled sleeplessness began to shift dramatically. The creation of permanent settlements, mud brick houses, and eventually, ancient cities provided a new layer of security against the terrors of the wild. Yet, even in the grand villas of ancient Rome or the bustling quarters of ancient Egypt, the midnight hours retained their unique character. In these early civilizations, a sleepless night was often spent writing poetry, studying philosophy, or engaging in religious devotion. The Roman philosopher Seneca wrote about the beauty of the midnight hours, viewing them as the only time a person could truly belong to themselves, free from the demands of public life. But as the centuries rolled on, a catastrophic shift occurred in the history of human rest. The advent of the Industrial Revolution and the widespread introduction of artificial lighting fundamentally rewired the human relationship with darkness. Suddenly, the night was no longer a space for segmented rest, reflection, and quiet socialization. It was transformed into an extension of the working day. The natural rhythm of the first and second sleep was systematically erased, replaced by the modern expectation of a single, unbroken block of unconsciousness designed to maximize economic productivity. We forced our bodies into a schedule dictated by the clock rather than the sun, And in doing so, we turned a natural variation in human consciousness into a clinical disorder. When we look back at the thousands of generations that came before us, we realize that the ancient response to sleeplessness was not to fight it, but to flow with it. They did not view an awake mind at midnight as a broken machine that needed fixing. They saw it as a temporary return to vigilance, a moment to create, to connect, to protect, and to wonder. The next time you find yourself staring at the ceiling in the dead of night, unable to find the sleep you so desperately seek, remember that you are not broken. You are simply stepping into a role that is as old as humanity itself. You are the night watchman, keeping vigil by an ancient, invisible fire, connected across the millennia to the countless ancestors who once sat in the very same darkness, waiting for the dawn.